Hello and welcome to my video on the 5 things I hate about my Acura NSX. I'll start this with saying I watch a lot of YouTube because I find it very entertaining, and I like to look at cars because I'm into cars, that sort of thing. And it's so interesting to me that the new trend is people explaining what they don't like about one of their most prized possessions. So I'll start with saying I love my Acura NSX. But there are some things, of course, that are not as ideal as maybe they could be. So I felt compelled, because there was nothing on the NSX as far as the 5 things that people dislike, so I felt compelled to put this together. So with that, I'm donning my NSX shirt. So first of all, I've owned 2 NSXs. So I had a 92 NSX, and this one behind me is a 2000. And I've loved them both. Matter of fact, after I sold the first one, I kind of freaked out, and then I tried to get a hold of one as quickly as I could, and that's where I ended up with this car, which I will never sell. That said, there's basically 3 primary models, and look guys, if you really know about NSXs, there's some details to what I'm saying, but for all practical purposes, there's the 91 to 98, roughly, somewhere in that time frame, where there's a 3-liter engine with a 5-speed, and there's an original ABS system. So if I understand correctly, the NSX was the first car to have anti-lock brakes, so they had the initial system. Then from 98 to 2001, which this car falls into, there was a 3.2-liter engine, and I know the 3.2 came in earlier, so we'll have to talk through that, but nonetheless, there's a 3.2-liter V6 engine and a new ABS system with the more current Hondas, basically, and then it moved to a 6-speed transmission. And again, don't push on the dates because there's actually nuances in there. And then from 02 to 05, when the NSX stopped its production, they had basically the same equipment that was in this, the 3.2, the new ABS, and the 6-speed transmission, except that they had hard lights. So this is one of the last versions with the pop-up lights, and it's all preference. I actually love them both. That said, what are the things I hate about this car? All right, number 1, hands down, the windows. I can't stand the windows on this car. They inspire zero confidence. When you pull up on that lever, you're just hoping it's going to make its way to the top. In addition to that, it's also the pressure fit windows, so I'll walk over and show you that in a second. Similar to like a van, most cars that have a Targa, they tend to do this, but the window just kind of presses up against the rubber. So unless that's in perfect alignment, what ends up happening is you get about 100 miles an hour and the pressure pulls the windows open and air comes, piling in. That's aggravating. I don't like that at all. So we'll show you that. So here's the window example that I'm referring to. So basically it's just a pressure fit. This particular model has a removable top. The earlier models did not, and you can actually get coupes in later models, but you had to special order them. So this window basically just presses up against here. And that's all well and good when it's aligned perfectly, but over time I think they kind of move a little bit, and basically this will start to pull out a little bit at higher speeds. In full disclosure, it's more like when you're over 100, then the wind starts to bleed in, so I don't like that. And then the windows themselves, they just don't go up and down very quickly, and there's actually issues with the earlier ones where you have to put this little fix-it thingy in there to make sure that it doesn't break and then drop down. But, I mean, don't get me wrong, it works, but I don't particularly love it. The second thing I do not like about NSXs is actually particular to the earlier models. So the models that had the early ABS system had this really interesting anomaly. So what would happen is if the system lost pressure or something along those lines, the ABS, I think it's the accumulator pump, and I'm not a mechanic or anything like that, but the ABS pump, it would squeal. And when I mean squeal like a pig. So here I'm driving this, although it was my 92, which I'll show you a picture of in a second. The accumulator would kick on, and right as I'm pulling out of a parking lot with, in college or something like that, or around a bunch of ladies with my luck, the car would just start squealing. Terrible noise. It was not enjoyable. So very embarrassing for a car that looks like that and then has that pig squeal. So that's the earlier models, and it's not on all of them, and you could probably fix it as well, but the earlier ABS system is a little bit finicky. It does the job, but it's got a couple of nuances, so I was pretty happy to get the new one. Other positive thing, if you have one of those earlier systems, you can simply override it or cancel it out, whatever you want to call it, delete it, and just electronically, and then you just don't use ABS. And frankly, the car is not so crazy that you have to really worry about the ABS. I mean, if you're on the track, okay, fine. But if you're driving on regular roads, the car is pretty stable, so you can't really complain about that. All right. The third thing that I do not like about the NSX is the cup holders, or lack thereof. I forget when the cup holders came in. It's probably in the 98 time frame, but the original models had no cup holders whatsoever. This model has cup holders, which are worse than having cup holders. They're terrible. I would never use them. There's obviously some things that you can do to put a cup holder in there, what have you. So I'll show you what I've done. So in the original NSX, the earlier models, and again, I think it's to about 98, there were no cup holders whatsoever. So what a lot of people did is, for people that wanted cup holders, I enjoy them, they have this unit. So this little metal thing just kind of sits up there, and you throw your coffee in there, and the good news is if it spills, then it goes on the mat below, so can't complain about that. A little risk to the car, which is good. What this particular model has, so like I said, I think 98 above, these are the cup holders. I've never used one. It's been so long. Here we go. Whoop, back here. These are the cup holders. I don't know what people were thinking when they put these in here. It's actually a bit of insulting for a car that's actually built so well that these are even in here. So I've never used them before. I'm actually surprised that the top actually flipped up when I pulled on it. So yeah, don't do that. The fourth thing that I kind of hate about the NSX is really also specific to the earlier NSXs. So I had a 92, and I'll show you that. So clearly I'm a believer in the NSX. That's my first NSX. It has, not aftermarket, but it has the later year wheels, but that's a 92 NSX with the hard top. So the fourth issue is the 5-speed transmission. Not that it's a bad transmission. Actually, for the track, it's probably wonderful. But for the streets, second gear is pretty tall. So I found in my 92 that when I had to come to a sharp corner or anything along those lines, there are times where I actually wanted to get into first gear to keep going. Don't get me wrong, it wouldn't stall in second gear, but you were really underpowered. So this version is the 6-speed. I much prefer the 6-speed. It's a stronger first gear, it's a stronger second gear, so I much prefer this particular model. The 3.2 probably helps that as well. But yeah, so the transmission on the earlier models, I didn't love it from a perspective of driving around town. The fifth thing that I don't love about the NSX is the sound. Now, I could get some flames based on this because some people really love the sound of this car. So this is the first VTEC engine to be put into production, as I understand it. And not that it sounds bad. It's a hard click over, so I think it's 5,500 RPM. The valves flip over, and but just the V6 does not sound wonderful. So, I mean, what am I comparing this to? So, I love this car. I'm comparing it to like a 458 Ferrari. So, the V8, I will take a V8 all day from a sound perspective. And the stock exhaust, particularly on the earlier years, but even on the later years as well, is super quiet. I mean, tame to the point where if I'm in the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through line and I rev my engine, if you didn't look behind you, you'd think it was a Honda Civic. So from that perspective, it didn't have a whole lot of oomph. So, in summary, those are the 5 things that I don't like about my Acura NSX. Now that I've done this video, I'm going to feel 100% compelled to tell you the 5 things that I love about this car, so I will probably post that right after I post this. So I recently did a video on the 5 things that I hate about the Acura NSX, and I love this car so much that I felt that I really had to do a second video to explain how much I love this thing and why. So there's a couple things. Firstly, the feel of the car. So personally, and I've owned, just to give you some background, so I've had a 1993 ZX naturally aspirated, I had a 5-liter 94 GT convertible Mustang, I had a Boxster S, and I mean, I had an Audi A4, which doesn't really fall into that category of car, but nonetheless, that's kind of my history. And I've driven a Ferrari 458, a 430, and a Gallardo. That weren't mine, but I've driven them. So this car, interestingly, has pretty much the best feel of any car I've ever driven. It's just a joy to drive. The clutch is pretty smooth. The transmission is wonderful, particularly for the 6-speed. The 5-speed, there's a couple things I don't like about that, which I talked about in my other video with second gear being so tall, but the 6-speed particularly, love it. The feel of the transmission, it's just so crisp and smooth. I love it. I actually have a shorter throw shifter, one of those short shift kits. You don't even need it, but I kind of liked it, so I went with that. But I love the feel of the car. Every time I drive it, I just feel like I'm just connected to the road, and it's wonderful. With that, we moved to the steering. So the steering is just, crisp. You can dart from one side to the other, or one side of the road to the other, or lane to lane, and it's just a wonderful feel, particularly if you use the stock alignment settings. So the earlier cars had a pretty aggressive alignment setting with some toe in the back where you're burning tires every 6 months. But if you want the car to feel like a race car, you put it on those settings and you'll be there. The later ones, they had some lawsuits because people were complaining that I bought a supercar and the tires wore out. Not really sure how you make that connection, but nonetheless, people had done that. And the later cars have a little bit less aggressive alignment. I actually have an out-of-stock alignment, and mind you, I have aftermarket wheels on here, and it's lowered a little bit, but I have it aligned even less aggressive than was designed, so my car handles actually much significantly less crisp than my original one did, which was my 92, which is up on the wall over there, picture. So that's about the feel of the car. I love that. Secondly, probably the best thing about the car, honestly, is reliability. So I am not a rich man. I'm pretty pleased to where I've made it, but nonetheless, I am not throwing cash around left and right. And the reliability of this car is just unparalleled. Miles are completely no concern whatsoever. People have, I know there's 300,000 mile NSXs out there. This one, I got fortunate when I picked this car up. I bought it with 42,000 miles, and I'm at about 60 right now, a little under that, I think. My previous NSX I sold with 120,000 miles. I keep in contact with that guy. He actually doesn't live that far from me, and he's still driving it like, it's brand new, and it looks brand new still, which is nice. So, very reliable. With that reliability, there's a couple issues you do need to be aware of if you were looking to get an NSX. So the clutch is strong. You don't need to worry about it as far as it burning out very quickly. Generally, if you drive the car normal and even on the spirited side of things, you get 100,000 miles out of the clutch pretty easily. I did replace the clutch in my 92, and the parts for the clutch, at least at the time, were about $1,700, and it was about $1,000 to put in. So that's a couple bucks. The clutch does cost some money. The second thing in relation to that is the timing belt. So this car does have a timing belt. It's basically designed in the late 80s, and that timing belt's not free. I usually plan on about $3,000 when I do the timing belt. So I just did the timing belt on this car, and it cost me right about $3,000. And most of that's the timing belt, but there's a certain portion of that that's just other things that, I'm there, the water pump and all that noise. So, it's not free. But aside from that, there's almost nothing you need to worry about. I mean, there's a couple odds and ends. I've blown an O2 sensor. On this car, I think O2 sensor is the only thing that's going wrong with this as I got it. So, pretty reliable. So that's a nice thing. I tell you, I'd own a Ferrari right now if I thought I could afford the maintenance. To me, the end-all, be-all of vehicles, just for comparison, Ferrari 458, no question. That is a beast. I love that vehicle, but first of all, I can't afford the price to entry, and I can't afford the maintenance either. So it is what it is. Next, the looks of the car. So I love the looks of this car. Now, it is not super flashy. It's clearly exotic, low, all that sort of thing. So I do love that. That's, it's timeless, I guess is the words I'll use. So the 2017 NSX is coming out this year, and I really love that car. I've seen it in person, and I do like it, but it is the kind of car that may not be timeless. It's got an aggressive styling to it, and it worries me a bit that car may not hold as much value over time. Of course, it'll be triple as fast as this car. This car is not particularly fast. It was built in the 90s. It's got 290 horsepower. It moves out of its way, but it is not a rocket ship by any means. So the next thing I would say is the visibility. So this car has wonderful visibility. Anecdotally, supposedly they use the F-16 cockpit. If you're familiar with that aircraft, it's kind of bubble cockpit, so the pilot can see around and whatever shoot things. This car has a similar type visibility. It is not like a supercar. which is good and bad, right? Sometimes when you get in a supercar, you want to feel like it's dangerous. This is not one of them. I let everyone drive this car. I have no concerns. If you know how to drive stick and you want to come drive my car, feel free. Let any one of my friends drive it. It's just not difficult to drive. It's a regular Honda from that perspective. But yeah, the visibility is wonderful. You can see out the back, you can see out the sides. It's just nice. Another NSX owner's got a Ford GT, and he said, as good as this is to see, on the positive side, he goes, you want to see the worst thing to see out of, go pick yourself up a Ford GT, if you could afford it. But nonetheless, a cool car, but apparently difficult to see out of. Other thing, I guess, is, and I guess it really just goes to the feel. So the power delivery, it's a very smooth power delivery. The engine, feels really strong. I do like that. Most of that's due to the weight, so it's about 3,000 pounds, probably a little more. And although the 290 horsepower is on the weaker side of things, but by today's standards, it's non-existent. But it still feels fast and it feels fun. It's a good car that will keep you out of trouble. It's not scary to drive. Frankly, the wheels don't break loose unless you're going out of your way to do that. Yeah, the power delivery, it's a real good feeling car. So from that perspective, really enjoy it. If you want to know more about these cars, by the way, one really positive thing about this car is there's really just one website. It's interesting, it didn't occur to me how beneficial that was until I bought my Porsche. So I had a Porsche Boxster S 2002, and when I wanted to make some changes, I realized there's like 600 different sites that Porsche kind of operates, not Porsche, but that different clubs operate. And you just gotta pick what one works best for you. With this car, there's one site. It's nsxprime.com. One word, NSX Prime. And it is a wonderful resource. I actually give to that site. I give money to them. And I'm not that kind of charity guy, but that site is beautiful. You have one-stop shop for pretty much anything you could possibly need. Anything you need to know about the NSX is on that site in one place or another, and there's a lot of great people there to help you, so that's wonderful. From a club perspective, there's also NSX Club of America, which I think is nsxca.com or something like that, and that's the single club that they have, but they're pretty much affiliated with NSX Prime, so it ends up working out pretty well. So you only have one place you have to deal with, so that's wonderful. We will not be doing a ride along in the NSX today because it is February in Connecticut, and not only do I have a foot of snow on the ground, it's probably about 20 degrees out there, so the car will not be making it out today. I have an aftermarket exhaust on this. I actually have a couple of them, but the one that's on here right now is ARK exhaust, DTS I believe it is, and it's pretty throaty, but I do get a little bit of drone with that. If you want to avoid drone and get an exhaust for this, the best one to my knowledge, which I also have, but it's damaged unfortunately, is an ARC titanium exhaust, which is boku dollars. It happened to come on this particular car when I bought it, so I used that. So that to me is the best sounding exhaust. Not super aggressive, but no drone. It's the only exhaust I know of that has no drone, and people argue that, but that's